Do you have people in your life who applaud your success? Do you have people in your life who you trust? Do you have people in your life who, when you trip and fall, they laugh with you and then they pick you up and push you back out there? There are people that you know who will be those people if you choose to have them. I am blessed to have an incredible family and incredible friends. My best friend from kindergarten is still one of my best friends.
That's crazy.
Right? Stacey Johnson.
Yeah, that's dope. I love it.
We used to go to the clubs and her father Seville.
Yeah.
And so I think that's part of it, right? Because you do need the support to deal with it. And especially, I mean, people who are active on social media, it's hard out there. It's tough. And you have to find things. Like, I love to cook.
Y'all not tired yet? I mean, come on. Kamala Harris won't go on Fox News. She won't do a comprehensive interview where she has to answer follow-up questions, where she has to be challenged on the things that happen in this current administration, but she goes on all the smoke. So she'll go on a podcast hosted by two potheads, ex-NBA players who are very low IQ. I mean, there's nothing serious about this interview, right? And then you sit here and you watch this woman try so hard to be authentic, and it's so cringe. Sis, I've never seen somebody go so far out of their way to prove their blackness while still not proving it. You made this about your identity. We never did. You made it about your identity. So then when people start to dig, then you're going to blame the people. You came up with the stuff that you came up with and shared it with the people. You were the first Indian everything until all of a sudden now you're a black woman.
All right, guys. So we got to talk about this super awkward interview that Kamala Harris did on the All the Smoke podcast, because Kamala Harris and Tim Walz can't seem to come up with any original ideas in regards to how they're going to campaign and reach people. So they're basically stealing the Trump strategy of doing the podcast circuit. And Kamala Harris is doing her rounds on the Black Urban podcast, and yeah, it was super awkward, okay? Mainly when Kamala Harris was confronted about the question surrounding her race and whether or not she is actually black.
But what do you feel, or what do you think when you hear people kind of questioning just the fabric of who you are?
Well, one, I don't listen to it.
Okay.
I'm really clear about who I am, and if anybody else is not, they need to go through their own level of therapy. That's not my issue.
Their issues, right?
My mother was very clear. She was raising two black girls to be two proud black women, and that was never a question. You know, it's funny because over the years, journalists, some, not most, will want to talk about it. And I say, okay, if you want to have this conversation, I'm prepared to have it, but sit down and get comfortable for a few hours. If you want to start talking about race in America, you want to talk about the 1/8 rule?
A drop.
You want to talk about what it means in terms of who you are perceived to be and the impact that can have on the rest of your life, regardless of who you actually are in terms of your God-given capacity and the rights that you have and should have. So, you know, I don't mess with that. I think that's other people trying to figure some stuff out that, and they
got some issues.
They got to deal with it themselves.
Yeah, so I found Kamala Harris's response to this question to be fascinating for multiple reasons, okay? Because apparently she has been confronted about this before by journalists in the past, okay? These journalists were probably doing their job, okay, and doing some investigative journalism, which according to the woke revolutionaries is a form of white supremacy, right? To ask questions about Kamala Harris's race. Is this woman really telling the truth about being black, okay? And her answer here, again, is interesting because she brings up the one-drop rule, right? Which is white supremacist ideology that the left is using to justify this idea that Kamala Harris is a black woman, right? They're saying, well, she probably has at least one drop of Negro blood, therefore she is black, okay? And I just found it to be very interesting how she brings that up, right? It seems to me that when a journalist wants to have a conversation with her about her family and whether or not she's black, she wants to guilt trip them about how race has been perceived in America. And that to me is a very interesting response for a woman that's supposed to be so blackety black, right? That is what they're trying to sell us. If Kamala Harris is as black as the pro-blacks claim that she is, right? If she's really soul sister number one, then she should not have to bring up the one drop rule in conversations about her race, because all she really has to do is to talk about her father's side of the family. Okay, these are my relatives. This is how I know them. This is when I met them. This is what I did growing up. Yada, yada, yada. That's all she has to do. All she has to do is to talk about her father's side of the family. He's an Afro-Jamaican. That's all she has to say. Okay, but she won't even say that. Okay, she is trying to shut down the conversation. That's what she does when people bring up her race, okay, which I find to be fascinating, because this is the only race conversation that the left doesn't want to have. Because typically, when there's a race conversation to be had, the left, they're the first people at the table, right? Let's talk about race. But when it comes to Kamala Harris, all of a sudden, no, they want to back away from the table and walk away. They don't want to talk about race anymore, right? I find that to be extremely fascinating. Also, on top of that, she mentioned how her mother raised her and her sister to be black women, right? Raised black girls. And I'm scratching my head because to me, it looks like Kamala's mother actually really raised them to be Indian women, right? I mean, if you look at all of the photos that we have of Kamala Harris growing up, it seems to me that she wasn't raised in a culturally black household or raised to be a black girl or whatever. She was raised in a culturally Indian household. She was raised to be an Indian woman, right? That to me is what it seems like, right? I'm just saying, I'm just going off what Kamala Harris is saying here, okay? But I don't really expect Steven Jackson and Matt Barnes to have a serious conversation with Kamala Harris about her blackness, right? Because my follow-up question would have been, well, how is it that an Indian woman can raise you to be black, right? Please explain how that works, okay? Please explain to me how that works, right? But regardless, that wasn't the most important part of the interview, okay? In regards to getting the answers that the American people seek from Kamala Harris, the most important part was when Kamala Harris was asked about the economy and what is she going to do to help out working class people? What is she going to do to get the economy back on track? And once again, Kamala Harris face plants on the question of the economy with more word salads. Take a look.
Going from a show to a whole entire company, what is your your economic plan moving forward for people who are living paycheck to paycheck and struggling for groceries and rent and homeowners?
So look, I grew up, so my sister and I were raised by our mother. We lived for a long time in an apartment on top of a child care center. That child care center was actually owned by a woman who lived 2 doors down from us, Mrs. Shelton, who was, by all of our accounts and feelings, our second mother. She helped raise us. And so she was a small business owner. So I'll start with the small business, and congratulations on what you guys have done. I, from a child, knew who our small business owners are, right? I mean, you're business leaders, but you're also civic leaders. You take seriously your voice and how you can mentor, how you can grow, right? Communities and the sense of communities.
1 minute, 37 seconds later.
And so part of my plan as president is to give small businesses, startups, a tax deduction of $50,000 to start up. Because right now the tax deduction is $5,000.
Can't do nothing with that.
That's exactly right. And see, the thing we know is that most of our small business, our entrepreneurs who want to start a small business, got a great idea, have incredible work ethic, but they weren't handed a bunch of money on a silver tray.
Right.
And they just need to get their foot in the door.
Yeah, so again, I apologize for making you guys sit through the word salad sandwich that Kamala Harris does every single time she's asked a direct question about the economy. She spends 2 minutes telling us about how she's from a middle-class family and yada yada, daycare, neighbor, some other story that I don't care about. I don't care about your neighbor. I don't care that you grew up in a middle-class family. What people want to know is how you're going to help working class families right now. And Kamala's answers to the question is always the same answers that she gives when she finishes her 2-minute filibuster, okay? And she basically says, well, I'm going to give a tax deduction to help people start small businesses, right? Except I don't think a tax deduction is going to help people start a small business, because ultimately you're not going to get that money. You're not going to see the benefit until you actually have started the business and you're generating some revenue. And then when you go and you file your returns, then you may see the benefit, but that's not going to help you start. Okay. So I think that Kamala Harris may be a little confused here in regards to a direct handout versus a tax deduction, but this is what she is proposing. Okay. And I personally think that these answers are just not going to move the needle, right? The same canned answers about the child tax credit and things like that, it's just not going to move the needle, right? Especially when you look at her policies compared to Trump's policies. Like, for example, no tax on tips, which Kamala Harris stole, by the way, and no tax on overtime. These are policies that will directly help Americans keep more of their own money without the government having to give them a handout, right? If you actually work, okay, and you generate some money, okay, you get to keep more of your own money, right? Yeah, that is going to help out people, okay? That's going to be a direct benefit to the American people in a way that I think is classic conservative policies, right? I mean, this is what we want, right? I mean, we want to keep more of what we earn, right? We don't want a government handout, okay? Kamala's plans involve more government handouts, okay, more spending, and will probably be inflationary, okay, at the end of the day, especially as interest rates start to decline, right? So combine the Democrats and their spending policies, their out of control spending policies that we have experienced the last 3 or 4 years, that along with interest rates declining, yeah, I mean, we're headed towards an inflationary environment under Kamala Harris's presidency if she wins. Lord forbid that she does. But hopefully the American people are not falling for the nonsense from Kamala Harris, okay? Because again, she's having trouble articulating a coherent plan when it comes to what she wants to do for the economy. And that means that Tim Walz is probably going to struggle with coming up with a coherent plan as well too, especially during this debate with JD Vance. So this is part of the reason why you have the mainstream liberal media already coming out and trying to lower expectations for Tim Walz going into this debate, because they already know that JD Vance is probably going to eat this man alive.
Tomorrow night, the debate. What will be the line of attacks that come out of there? We probably expect J.D. Vance to be more on message than what Donald Trump has been about Kamala Harris. But what about Tim Walz? This is what our reporting from our colleague Isaac Dover from over the weekend says, that Walz constantly comes back to how worried he is about letting Harris down, and aides insist that isn't just about setting expectation. The governor fears he won't make his case as well as he needs to. It is expectation setting. They're trying to lower the bar.
He's so nervous. He's scared.
Yes, but Vance is a good debater.
Yeah, I mean, look, I think Vance is going to be a very good debater. He's nothing like Trump. He'll be very focused. And Walz will definitely have to be on his toes to push back on the idea that Harris is extreme and that she's been weak on the border and that, they're extreme liberals. I think he will have to be on his toes about that, but I think that he's likely very well prepared because he does have that everyman thing, which I don't think Vance really has. Yeah. Vance is very studied, but is he someone you want to get a beer with? Yeah. I don't know.
Walz, he used to be all over the airwaves. He used to be a regular presence on cable news everywhere, but since he became VP, he's really not done much. I mean, he did the Dana Bash interview, and then maybe a couple other poll sides, but really has not been anywhere.
This has been a consistent feature of the Harris campaign, even after they chose Walz, likely because he did so well in some of those interviews. They have taken a media strategy that is first a do no harm one, one that puts them in front of people that they know are kind of going to be more sympathetic, one that has not put them in more confrontational settings. And I think it has added to the kind of perception that maybe they are running from the story they have to tell about the change of values from then to now. That is a choice that they have made. They could put people in front of more people, have them answer more questions. Now, I think
is that a risk? Is that a risk as we head into this high-profile debate?
I imagine it's a risk, but keeping them away is a risk, too. And I think that we are seeing some of the fruits of that right now. Part of the reason each one of these debates and moments has so much pressure on Harris and Walz when they come is because they're doing so few of them. One thing Vance has done over the last 3 weeks is go on a ton of podcasts, do a ton of interviews, do a ton of kind of media things. And we haven't seen that reverse his favorability, right? We still know that he's underwater. Things like the childless cat lady comment or things will be held over his head. But he has put himself in situations. And one of the things the Democrats have curiously not done for me is do that type of spreading spreading the message all across the field. You have Harris today on things like All the Smoke podcast. They'll go on Subway Takes. They'll do stuff like that. But that's not answering the core question people have of them, which is who are they and what they believe in. Going on those things does not do that job.
Yeah, she definitely did not do that on the All the Smoke podcast that we just went over. Okay, she definitely did not answer the questions that people have of her. Okay, she didn't do that at all. And also on top of that, Tim Walz is not somebody I would want to have a beer with, right? I wouldn't even allow Tim Walz around a playground, okay? So I definitely would not say that Tim Walz appeals to the everyday working man or whatever they were saying on CNN. No way, okay? I don't think that the average man really can see themselves in Tim Walz, right? I don't think they can really relate to Tim Walz. I mean, the guy is just a weirdo, okay? No man that I know runs around carrying themselves the way that Tim Walz carries himself or the way that Doug Emhoff carries himself, okay? Because what they're also trying to do is to sell us this idea that the real man is a man like Doug Emhoff, who, is embracing modern masculinity. He's a wife guy. Take a look.
Something that has also been an important part or an interesting part of how people have talked about your role here is how your role has reshaped the perception of masculinity. And I'm not sure you planned on that, but you are an incredibly supportive spouse. Has that been an evolution for you? And do you think that's part of the role you might play as first gentleman?
It's funny, I've started to think a lot about this. I've always been like this. My dad was like this. And to me, it's the right thing to do, support women. If some woman succeeds, some dude out there is suffering, it's not a one-to-one relationship. When we lift up women, we lift up families, we lift up the economy. And when I was in the business world, it lifted up the organizations that I was in. It certainly lifted up the White House when you were there, with you there and Kamala as vice president. It was a great workplace there.
There's a pop culture phrase, wife guy, which you've kind of been known as. Are you familiar with this?
I've heard about it.
As called a wife guy, a proud wife guy? How do you feel about that?
Well, if I do something annoying to Kamala and she gets upset, I'll just show her that article.
Right.
And I'll say, I'm trying.
Or a t-shirt or a mug.
Yeah.
Wow. The estrogen levels in that room were off the charts. Okay, no doubt. But if, the Kamala Jen Psaki workplace was so great, okay, then why is it that we have reports of Kamala's staff leaving, okay, en masse because of how bad the work environment was? Again, so what we have here is just an all-around mess, okay? Kamala Harris has a big issue with word salads, okay? And apparently, Tim Walz has a big issue with word salads as well, too, right? He has the same issues that she has, and that's why they're trying to lower the expectations for Tim Walz going into this debate, okay? But he should not have come out and claimed that he couldn't wait to debate J.D. Vance if he was not confident in his skills, right? Now, all of a sudden, they want to say, well, Tim Walz, he's not really that type of guy, right? He's not really that type of guy. And I'm like, well, hey, it's kind of too late for all that because this is what he told us, right? The whole point of Tim Walz being picked was to appeal to men, right? And to show us that he's that guy, right? But apparently, when it comes time for Tim Walz to show us that he's that guy, we're supposed to lower our expectations, right? This is what the media is doing. So I find that to be fascinating, okay? But let me know what you guys think. Make sure you like, comment, and subscribe. Most importantly, share a Black conservative perspective. Peace.